This is the intro. Okay. Welcome to the Dojo. Blech. I am not good at this. Let's get into it. Hey Tim, so what's your first story today?
Well, my first story today is the Google August core update, which is apparently designed to help small and independent sites.
Interesting. Okay, tell me more. Let's assume I know nothing at all.
So every so often Google releases what's known as a core update. This is a more, I guess it's a larger scale update to its ranking algorithms. And it's not uncommon to see a lot of ranking fluctuations around these core updates. This is the latest one. And I think one of the reasons why I've brought this onto the show today is because there is a fair amount of volatility in the search results at the moment. And there's a few things going on right now. We've got the August core update. There's also a ranking bug which has been happening, which is apparently being affecting lots of sites, although that's supposedly fixed roundabout now. And then we've also got Google rolling out AI overviews to the UK. So all of these three things combined means there's a lot of volatility in the search results at the moment. It's difficult to pin down whether that volatility, if you're seeing a ranking growth or ranking drop, is because of the core update or the ranking bug, or AI overviews. But this is a fairly sizable update, it sounds like. John Mueller from Google has said, this latest update takes into account the feedback we've heard from some creators and others over the past few months. As always, we aim to connect people with a range of high-quality sites, including small or independent sites that are creating useful, original content on relevant searches. This is an area we'll continue to address in future updates. Now, if it sounds like he's talking around the bush there, he basically is. There's been a lot of criticism of Google's most recent updates, pretty much since the helpful content update last September, and in particular focused on some sites that have seen their ranking absolutely decimated. And a lot in the SEO community are wondering why certain sites have been so heavily hit. So it sounds like John and the Google team have been sort of listening to that feedback and trying to work out the latest core update to maybe undo some of that damage. From what I can see so far, some sites have recovered a bit of lost visibility from helpful content update. Others have been hammered even further. I wouldn't say it's conclusive that this is like a reversal of helpful content or anything like that. But it seems messy at the moment. And I think given all of the trust that's been broken down between what Google says and what they actually do over the last few months, I find it very difficult to believe pretty much anything coming out from Google at the moment.
So you said in there about they seem to be making some reversals and trying to fix some stuff that they did previously. What is it, do you think, that they're trying to not achieve? Because I think we know what they're trying to achieve and trying to make search better. But what do you think is that they're looking at these websites and determining that's not good for SEO or that's not good for search?
It's really difficult to pinpoint it, to be honest, because I think a lot of the sites that have been damaged, I mean, you would say a lot of the sites that have been damaged are they have some business model which relies on them ranking in search. And I don't just mean like businesses that are showing up in search to drive traffic to their products or services, but a lot of the sites that have been hammered are sort of content sites, we would call them. And they're either monetizing through affiliate revenue or, they have some sort of membership or something like that. So these are sites that are run by marketers where their business model is essentially get ranking on Google. And there has been some talk about Google not liking content that is designed purely to rank. Well, obviously these sites, they are designed purely to rank because that's how they get customers. This is like the step one in their business model. So whether there's something of that, I'm not too sure. I mean, I think a lot of the complaints people have had about Google results really over the last year has been a lot more Reddit results showing up in the search. Also, some instances where sites that scrape and republish content have actually been outranking the sites that they're scraping and republishing from. So there's been some complaints about that. And then there are, like legitimate review sites that do actual reviews of the products that they are talking about, and they will, first-hand review them. And some of them have been damaged. And I think a lot of the confusion and anger from the SEO community has really been that the sort of sites that Google says it wants to reward, actually, it feels like some of the sites that have seen the greatest losses should have been rewarded by these updates. So I don't know. I think what the intent is and what the execution is might be slightly different, or it might just be that Google's decided that certain types of sites aren't particularly the sort of thing it wants to reward. It's difficult to pinpoint it though, and I haven't seen any sort of conclusive, compelling takes on this.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said about writing for search, and clearly some of these websites have been doing that. They've been trying to get at the top of the rankings. But if I'm in SEO, if I'm a business owner or somebody running a website, and I want some of the organic traffic that Google provides, clearly I'm going to write for search to a certain point. But do you know where like the cutoff should be? Like, what would you recommend to people who are, maybe coming to an agency like ours for content or doing content in house? So where's the line really?
I mean, personally, I think that whole you shouldn't just be writing for ranking is total garbage. Of course, we're writing for ranking, right? We wouldn't publish it on most websites wouldn't be publishing content if their goal wasn't to get ranking in search. If we wanted to communicate to our customers, we'd send them an email and we'd just write the whole post in the email. Otherwise, we've got to get them onto the website first. Very few people are, oh, I wonder what HubSpot's writing about on its blog today, right? It just doesn't happen. Like, we all know the whole point of that blog, the whole point of that knowledge base is to get ranking, get organic traffic. And that's why people go to Google, to get information. So we're all essentially writing for Google, and Google is happy to monetize that traffic. It's happy to, take the ad budget that goes on from those sites. It's happy to keep coming back to Google to get that type of content. I think this is one of Google's, the false flag things where it tries to distract you. Don't just write for SEO, write for the best user experience, as measured by your Chrome clicks, which you don't track. So personally, I think as long as it's good, as long as it's really useful, interesting information that shares your first-hand experience, really, and it's a topic that you know very well, you or the organization that you're writing on behalf. I don't know. I don't know how Google can tell what's been written for search and what hasn't, unless because it's been published, it's been written for search.
It's interesting because you said before about some of these, companies or some of these people using tools in order to kind of regenerate new content based off content that already exists or an idea that already exists. I mean, the elephant in the room is like ChatGPT and those kind of tools. There are other providers that will create content for you as well using AI. But it's interesting that some of the companies doing that have used the same tools for their own websites. And I kid you not, from Friday, the 16th of August, I think it was, when the algorithm started to update, those websites using AI have like gone up in the rankings. I was sitting there over the weekend checking in and going, okay, any second now they're going to decrease in ranking because they're using AI. Like, they're publicly talking about it on LinkedIn and saying, this is the content strategy. We're using our tool in-house to create content. I'm like, amazing. Just watch. I've got my popcorn ready, and it's not happened. So what would you say to people who are thinking like, why don't we just go ahead and use AI for all our content if it seems to be working for these websites? Not all, but some.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, isn't it? I think a couple of things I'd say. Firstly, the core updates typically take around a month to roll out, and I think that's the same here. So we haven't seen the full rollout of this thing, and it might be that some sites see a bump and then they come down again. I think the wider point, though, is what about publishing AI-generated content as a content strategy? I can see a time when it would make sense. For example, let's say that you had an AI that was hooked into all of your past client work. Let's say that we were going to do it for Exposure Ninja. Right? If we had an AI that was hooked into all our past client work, all of our proprietary information, our proprietary processes, our data, and we used the AI to write some piece that had some unique perspective, then I think something like that could be interesting. And I can see how that would provide value to users. I think if you're just going into a tool and typing, write me an article on XYZ, and then it writes you an article on XYZ and you post it, anybody who's actually looking for detailed information will, at the moment, based on the tools that I've used, find that article quite unsatisfactory. it will feel generic, it will feel difficult to get into. And of course, there won't be any first-hand experience because the AI is just writing based on, weighted averages of next words and relationships between concepts. So there's nothing unique, there's nothing authoritative about that. And I think that's one of the reasons why certain, it's very rare that you'd see like purely AI generated podcasts, for example, because you just don't get that level of engagement. And I think what we know about Google's algorithms and the data that it is using from Chrome and from, click data, long clicks, last longest clicks from search, even if you can get some ranking from AI content, the danger is that traffic, those visitors aren't going to stick around. Google's not going to see the positive usage metrics that it wants to from those clicks. So that might be potentially short-lived. But it's unless you're willing to invest in producing the best quality content, then it is really tempting to just go to ChatGPT and you've got an infinite content generation machine at almost no cost. And if you're willing to gamble, if the future of the site doesn't really matter too much, I can see why some people are making that trade.
Yeah, I think with content, because there's so many different types of content you can create for your website, for social and stuff like that, you got to sort your content to two lists of, is using AI for that content going to be risky or riskless? AI content for search, I think, goes into the risky area, but using content you already have to do snippets or smaller carousels for LinkedIn or Instagram, or using a video and then turning it into some posts for your founders to then go and use, I think that's riskless. There's no risk in there because you're not going to get de-ranked by LinkedIn search algorithm because it doesn't have one. Like, there are some areas where you can do it, and it's going to be, again, a list for risky for search, maybe, or not risky for search. This kind of content might be fine. Like your help desk information is riskless. You can use it there. It makes no difference whatsoever. But maybe there's another one for like risky and riskless for your brand. Is doing AI kind of content for search or wherever gonna impact how people feel about your brand and how likely they are going to use you? I think that is also another consideration you need to have. And I have a personal experience of this from just this week where I emailed a company to say that my subscription hadn't gone through and could we process that today. And so, because I wanted the thing, it was something for my daughter to have, and she's sitting around, and I'm like, I need the thing now to keep her busy so I can still do stuff. I was like, can you do it today? And I got a reply really quickly. I was like, that's amazing. They're going to do it. I looked through and the response was great. Superb response. They weren't going to do the thing I needed. But at the end, it said, this response was generated by AI, and I immediately had a disconnect, and like my sentiment level, like I could feel it decrease for that brand, because I was like, I know you've helped me, and I know this shouldn't bother me, but the fact that it was AI, it felt very similar to when you used to get put through to a call center somewhere else other than like the town you're in. Like, you'd hear a different accent, you'd be like, oh God, this is just going to take way longer than it should do. It's going to be really poor customer service. My immediate thing was like, my expectation of the customer service of that brand has gone down because the AI has been used in this way. Whereas if they hadn't said it was done by AI, maybe I wouldn't have done. So again, risky and riskless for your search traffic, but also for brand sentiment as well. So you've got to really play it safe.
Yeah. I think there's that's a great point. If you just view the stuff that you publish on your website as essentially traffic magnet stuff, it just gets ranking, and it's just, I don't really like the word content for this reason, because it just labels, blog posts or text as just content. It's just like a block of stuff. It's like a utility, a commodity. I think if you're thinking of it like that, then fine, AI doesn't really matter, or it matters less. And yes, of course, there's like long-term risk for your site and there's reputational risk. But if that's the standard that you've got for the stuff that you're publishing on your website, then you probably need to raise your standards a little bit more. Because if people are just looking for generic information, they're going to get that from AI overviews. They're going to get that from ChatGPT or whatever. What people are really going to want, and what they're going to want to come to websites for, is that experience, that first-hand knowledge, that stuff that they can't get from the AI chatbot. So I think this is like, it's almost like if you can produce the blog with AI, then it's the wrong topic, or we're going into the wrong amount of depth for this to be useful. And then we've just got, you've got the fundamental fact that at the moment, any one of our writing team or editorial team can immediately tell AI generated content. It's just not good enough to be the top grade of content that you're really wanting if you want to produce something that actually generates leads as well as just generating short-term clicks on Google. But we shall see. We shall see. No, all the AI tools are improving as fast as they possibly can, and maybe this will change over time. Who knows?
Yeah, I was demoing one last night with Canva. I noticed that they added something called brand voice, where if you add it into your brand kit, you then press like rewrite, and it will rewrite some copy in your brand voice. And what I did is I fed our PDF copy of our tone of voice guidelines into AI Studio, which is a Google thing. Used Gemini Pro 1.5 Pro to condense it into like a 500 character paragraph summarizing our tone of voice guidelines, put that in, fed in my copy from a script that I downloaded into some slides, told it to rewrite it. And I have to say it did a pretty good job, but I still had to go through there and finesse it. And I think for all of that time I spent, like, that was the first attempt, so it's going to take longer, but all of that time spent doing it, I probably could have written the slides from scratch and saved myself a bit of time. So I can see like the advantage, and it feels cool. Like when I first used Midjourney, I was like, "This is amazing! I could do so much." And the reality is, by the end of it, you're like, "I've wasted so much time. Like I could do better just by boshing it out and using my expertise instead." So yeah, there's a limit. You mentioned in there something about AI overviews. What's the development there, Tim?
Yes, let's get so people who are on the who are watching this as a video will be able to see. So AI overviews, I think you pointed this out, are now live in the UK and for some people who aren't signed in as well. And they've actually changed it. So how Google has tended to roll out these AI overviews has been, it tests a bunch of stuff in Search Labs, which is for the geeks like you and I, Dale, to sign up and see all these things in test mode. Once it's tested them in Search Labs, it can then roll them out to the public, and it generally does this quite slowly. So Google's launched AI overviews in the UK as it said it was going to, but one of the most interesting things for me is that the format that AI overviews are taking is actually one that we haven't seen in Search Labs. And in particular, we've got the return of the carousel. So if you've been following AI overviews for a long time, then you'll know that initially when they launched, you get a generative AI answer on the left-hand side of the page with a little link to see, or a little drop-down arrow it used to be, to see the websites that corroborate that part of the answer. And then on the right-hand side, you get a list of websites, and these would have little pictures with them. And this was the carousel. You could scroll through them. And then the carousel disappeared and you just had the links. And then, now they've launched it. And instead of a sort of a horizontal carousel, this time we've got a kind of vertical carousel where we've got some links to websites on the right-hand side. You can only ever see 3 by default, or you can click show all. Now, the websites that are being linked in this vertical carousel, this vertical non-moving carousel, this vertical static carousel panel, they would probably call it, are links that are corroborating various different pieces of the answer. And then you can click on the little link icon next to any part of the answer, and you can see the websites that corroborate that particular sentence. So it's a new implementation of AI overviews. I think actually I really like this version because above the fold, you've got 3 websites and you can see a title, you can see a meta description. And I think this is really, really cool. I think websites will get a lot more traffic from this implementation rather than the previous one. And I'm really, really keen to see how clients' traffic is impacted by this. We've seen some clients already ranking in AI overviews for the first time in the UK. So as soon as they were out in test mode, we started testing with our clients and optimizing our clients for them. And then now they've rolled out and we've got some visibility there. So that's great. But yes, it's just a different look. I mean, what's your take on it, Dale? You've been following this since the very, very start. How do you like this new version of AI overviews?
I'm just thinking back because you and I have gone backwards and forwards on what we'd like and dislike about the
Yeah.
design of this since like May of last year. Before I get into what I like and dislike, perhaps you anybody who's listening in, if you just hop over to YouTube and search for Exposure Ninja, you'll be able to watch this episode and see some of the visuals. Perhaps you could like change this to a mobile view and show people what they might be seeing there, if that works for you on this thing. I'm curious. Yeah, it's not going to work, is it? The mobile views are very slightly different. I don't know if it's going to come up for you or not. But anyway, I I gotta say I kind of prefer the old version. I see the sense in doing the panel that you get everything above the fold, but given how much informational search happens on mobile,
Hmm.
this isn't going to work out anyway. Like I imagine that people are going to see the panel and it's going to be effective, but you got too much choice, in my opinion. You almost don't know where your eyes need to look. With the panels that come up currently on the right hand side for like map packs and things like that, most of the time, they're not getting as many clicks as the panels that they use in 2024, where it's like it takes up the entirety of the top of the page. Like if you search for like a film or a subject matter that brings up, search for a film you might have seen, the Avengers, you get, well, maybe not on your view, Tim. What's going on here?
There we
Yeah,
go.
okay,
There we
there we go. So you get all this information above the fold because I think they know people are not paying attention when it's left to right. There's stuff here, there's stuff there. But if it just takes up the entirety of that top half of the screen, I can imagine the attention there is super high. Like when we do studies, looking at what Hotjar does and VWM and all those like conversion rate optimization tools, they always look at like eye tracking, what do people look at first, they look at sidebars. Generally the statistics over the years have said that people don't look at sidebars anymore. So for them to go ahead and add this panel to the right feels counterintuitive to I think how people use search anyway. Like I think
go.
people are going to come in, they want to see the information at the top, and then they'll scroll down for more detail if they don't click through. So the idea that there are links on the right, I don't think is going to be a long term thing. Personally, I just don't see it. I think the in copy carousel was far more effective at grabbing your attention.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, I mean, obviously Google has rolled this out without any. Google must have rolled this version out without much user feedback, right? Because we would have normally we see it in search labs. We get to test it. Google's collecting loads of data from the geeks of us who don't mind testing half-finished stuff, and then it decides what to roll out. Whereas this, it just seems to have pushed go. I mean, I haven't seen this version. I'm fairly switched on with seeing the different versions of AI overviews that people are seeing. I haven't seen this before. It's pretty wild of them to just go and release it without too much testing. But we shall see. We shall see. It looks like AI overview's story is not finished yet, and
No,
Google
no.
still hasn't settled on the finished version. I'll be very surprised if this doesn't change again within the next few months as they keep poking around on it and seeing what works. And of
Yeah.
course, the big question here is where do they integrate ads? And I'm wondering if one of the reasons that they've put this panel on the right hand side is because it would be quite easy to stick an ad into this
Hmm.
panel. Whereas when it was just a carousel underneath each paragraph, where would you put the ads? I don't understand how you'd see the ads there. Whereas this, I think, is much, you could have the first link here could be sponsored quite
Yeah,
easily. And that would
absolutely.
sort of fit with Google's existing ad inventory, which is title and description. So
Yeah.
we shall see.
Yeah, from our perspective, I totally see it, but that really depends on if ads are still going to be a product of Google or not, or if that's going to be an
Oh.
entirely different business. Tim, do you have any updates on that one?
No, well, actually, the DOJ seems to be a little bit more vocal on the idea of breaking up Google as a remedy for this antitrust lawsuit, which we covered last week. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think if they were going to break up Google, it seems like it's like splitting out the ad unit, which some people have talked about, would be very difficult to do, given that the search engine itself is just the media property that feeds the ad empire. So I think maybe more likely that Android would be split out because Android would make money, I guess, primarily from being licensed by different manufacturers, but also Android would also make money from selling the default searches back to Google. So yeah, maybe there's a business model there that it could be split out. But no, we wait and see what the remedies the DOJ comes down with. That's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was listening to the All In podcast the other day, which I don't really do, but for research purposes, I was like, I'll have a listen. And they were talking about how difficult it would be to split up some of these companies because the server structure underneath everything is just so interlaced and integrate. It'd be almost
Yeah.
impossible. That like I could totally see the Android pushing it off, YouTube possibly, but even then, like so much of that ad structure is baked into its empire. So yeah,
Mm,
hard to do.
very hard.
Talking of ads, Tim, you mentioned I think earlier on something about US election ads. What was that about?
Yes. So my sort of fascination with political ads. I'm not particularly political. I think I've said before. I don't typically tend to vote and view the whole thing as a bit of a soap opera, to be honest. But I was looking at spurred as I often am by an amazing FT article. I was just doing a bit of digging into the Harris and Trump Meta campaigns and their digital ad campaigns, and I'm really encouraged to see some good, solid digital marketing here, and a lot of it, I think, actually businesses can learn from. Weirdly, like political ads always used to be a bit of a dumpster fire, digitally anyway. But actually, there's a lot of really smart sort of stuff going, and I think a lot of principles that businesses can learn from. Um, some sort of general, I guess, general strategic pieces. So we can see both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump's campaign spending quite a lot of money. Actually, Kamala's campaign is spending a huge amount more. I think maybe 130 million or something between now and the election. So vast, vast sums here. And what's most interesting to me is how they're spending their budget and the messages that they're using and how they're different to each other. So if we think about when we run a digital marketing campaign for clients, one of the things that we've spoken about fairly recently is if you've got a fairly broad potential customer base, sometimes it makes sense to target the whole customer base, but often it makes sense to laser target particular customer segments because you can get more traction there. And we see this with both the Harris and the Trump campaigns. So just for example, on gender, Meta ads for Kamala Harris skewing mainly towards women, 65% of their ad budget being put towards women, whereas Trump is skewing slightly higher towards men. I don't think there's any surprise there. One of Kamala's big pitches is, well, if you're a woman, you've kind of got to support me because the other guy's anti-woman or whatever. So there's that. We've got location targeting as well. They're obviously competing very hard for swing states. So Pennsylvania and Georgia, putting a lot of budget behind those. But they're also going pretty heavy in some of the states that they consider to be safe bets for them. So Harris going very strongly in California, Trump going very strong into Florida. Interesting to see the difference on some of the CTAs and how they present the CTAs. So the CTA for a lot of Kamala's campaigns is about donation. It's about donations. The same with the Trump campaign, but the message is slightly different. So Trump seems to be going after lots of smaller donations, and there's a lot of conversation in the ad copy about whatever you can afford, even if you can only contribute a little bit, that type of thing. Both campaigns are using influencers. So Donald Trump's got some stuff using Hulk Hogan. I don't know if I can find one of those. Hulk's actually ripping open his shirt in the Meta ads, talking about Trumpomania, I think he calls it. Here's one here for those who are watching on the YouTube channel. You'll be able to see this in all its glory. Kamala's also using influencers. One of the ways that they're using influencers is what we've spoken about a bit before. If you want to say something about your brand or your product or your service, but to say it yourself would feel a little bit arrogant or a little bit out there, you can get someone unrelated to say it, for example, a testimonial or a customer story. And Kamala's got a bit of this where there are people who are saying certain things on her behalf about Trump's approach to women or some of the policies and how they're affecting women. And they've actually got other people that are outside of the campaign. This is very UGC style, which I think can make a really compelling ad case, because it's almost like the impression that you get from seeing this is, wow, people just like me or people who I can relate to are also feeling this way or are feeling a certain type of way. And that can be quite influential. It's not just about let's get the figurehead from the campaign talking about this. Sometimes it's about sort of mobilizing the audience and using that message. I'm also really interested to see the ad creative that the Harris campaign is using, and a lot of this is really, straightforward stuff. It's like screenshots of text messages. It's even screenshots of Apple Notes, right? This is the type of UGC that we'd see sort of pretty DIY brands using. And instead of going for flashy looking political ads, it's just, here's an Apple Note that says, why should you donate today? And then it just talks about why they should donate. And it's even got the time and the battery bar and the signal strength at the top. So it's just clearly a screenshot. I think that's really interesting, given the amount of budget that they're putting behind the ad cost, the fact that they're still using this really basic creative. They will have tested it. They're finding that this works, like a lot of us do with campaigns. So I think there's a lot to sort of like about this stuff, really, and a lot of lessons that businesses can learn from. I mean, we ask a question at the end of the Dojo podcast, don't we? What would you do with infinite ad budget? Well, that's essentially what Kamala and Trump are able to do. And it's interesting to see what they actually do with infinite ad budget. What are your thoughts on all this, Dale?
I'm just curious about, like, my expectation with political ads is the pattern interrupt. So, like, you want to catch somebody off guard and make them think about the policy or whatever it is that you're trying to communicate with them, to your segment of the audience, or whatever it is. Whereas this doesn't really feel like this. It feels more like the ads that you're used to when you're scrolling through Instagram, or you're scrolling through Twitter, or scrolling through TikTok or wherever else. So I'm really quite surprised. But maybe that's the audience they are trying to mobilize by making it fit in and seem like politics isn't this very different thing. Like, politics isn't for them, it's for all of us. So if the ad comes up, it's like, this is something you should care about as much as you care about the shampoo that we're using, or the new toothpaste that does whatever, and blah blah blah. Like, I'm surprised that it's not like completely left field and, really strikes you and stops the scroll and things like that. But I can also see the sense as well. But what I really love about all of the visuals that you're showing on screen now is how willing they are to just test a whole bunch of stuff to see what sticks, reduce what doesn't, and try new tests. Just test again, see what works. Like, just since they do have, I mean, they do have pretty vast ad budget spends, I would expect. So since you do have that, just literally just do whatever you can. And I think this ties into some of our recent videos that you can go and see on YouTube about test what you can, because you never know how much more of a final conversion, in this case a vote, you can get by just tweaking a couple of things here or there. Just do one test a week, run different ad copy, try different headline on your key landing pages, and so on.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. They clearly are testing, and it's interesting to see that, I guess, Trump's ads as a whole look a bit more polished, whereas you might be right. Like, it's almost like the Harris campaign in particular seems to want to use very UGC style. It's almost like, well, this is just of the people, right? It's not designed to stand out. It's not designed to look inaccessible or fancy or expensive. It's like it's a green background, not dissimilar to the brat green, with some black text on it. Like, there's nothing fancy about this at all, is it? That they might be spending millions of dollars a day on the budget, but they're clearly not spending millions of dollars a day on the creative itself. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great. We've got a couple of minutes left. Tim, you had a story you briefly mentioned in the build-up to this podcast about Elon Musk. Tell us a little bit more. What should we know about Elon this week?
Oh, what's Elon doing today? So, I mean, the main story is, I guess, X, formerly known as Twitter's advertising appeal, and how that has changed or atrophied over the last couple of years since Elon took it over. So the story this week is that there's a group called the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, or GARM. And GARM is an industry group made up of some big advertisers. And they are essentially, they've tasked themselves with protecting advertisers from their ads appearing around illegal or harmful content. So their issue is that a lot of social networks have unsuitable content on. If you're Procter and Gamble, you don't want your ads showing up next to images of hate speech or violence or inappropriate stuff. So GARM is set up to advise, and they've got various tools that help advertisers monitor how safe a particular platform's content is. So Elon has decided to sue GARM, or X has decided to sue GARM, declaring that it was withholding billions of dollars in advertising, which is kind of interesting, right? There's almost an assumption there that this money was due to X. This budget was allocated to X rightfully, and that GARM has somehow stopped this money from coming through. So it's accused it of withholding revenue, which is quite extraordinary, and conspiring to boycott X. Now, of course, Elon is also a free speech advocate, and this seems somewhat counterproductive, because free speech means that I have the right to advertise or the right to not advertise, and it is my choice. So it's kind of odd that that's in there. But anyway, Elon decided to sue GARM, and GARM says they're a small non-profit, so they immediately shut down. They can't battle this, so they've decided that they're going to discontinue their activities. What will happen now, I don't know. But Twitter's annoyed that advertisers aren't advertising with it. And of course, what are the advertisers really worried about? The advertisers are worried about the fact that X has fewer moderators than it did before Elon. Anyone who spends any time on X will know that the amount of strange stuff that you see, the stuff that's outside the lines, has undoubtedly increased. And advertisers are inevitably concerned about appearing against that type of stuff. And as if there could be any better demonstration of this, X then releases an update to its Grok chatbot with an image generator powered by Flux, allowing users to make their own AI images. Now, we all know what happened when Google released its image generator, and it added a layer of folks on the right would call it wokeness, right? Where you asked for pictures of presidents and you got the black Abraham Lincoln and stuff like this. And there was a lot of attention around AI image generators and how we build guardrails around them so that they are accurate, but also that they can't create stuff which could be misused. Well, X doesn't seem to have worried about any of that, because it seems that there's basically very few guardrails at all on this thing. Like, it won't create pornography, but other than that, pretty much have at it. So if you want a picture of Minnie Mouse soaked in blood after what looks like a massacre, you can get it, right? This Grok chatbot will give you that. If you want a picture of Donald Trump sat at the controls of an aeroplane that looks like it's just flown into the Twin Towers, you can get that. Like, this stuff is really unhinged, and from a brand's perspective, there is no way that you would go anywhere near a platform that is producing this type of stuff. So it's kind of interesting that, at the start of the week, Elon's like, wait, these advertisers should be advertising on X. What about brand safety? We're brand safe. And then at the end of the week, they're like releasing probably the least brand safe, borderline suicidal tool that I've ever seen. This is absolutely appalling. And I think the amount of IP lawsuits that are going to come in from the likes of Disney, who don't want to see their characters being produced in this way, is going to be utterly staggering. So it's going to be really entertaining, I think, to see what comes out of this. But certainly, if I'm an advertiser that cares about brand safety, my impression of X is only trending down, unfortunately, for that platform.
Any advice to marketing directors and business owners who are considering what they should do with the platform?
Well, I mean, if you don't care about brand safety, on the plus side of all of this, you would assume that X inventory is going to be cheap, right?
Yeah.
So if you just need eyeballs and you don't mind about what you're appearing against, then, I can see an argument for running some ads on there. There's a New York Times article that said X's revenue in the US, which is about 50% of its total revenue, in Q2 was 114 million, which is absolutely tiny for a platform of this size. That's a 25% decline quarter on quarter, and less than half what the revenue was from the US last year. So advertisers are leaving in droves. And this is only going to mean that the ad inventory is going to be a lot lower cost. Now, there is a concern about its ongoing viability. X needs to make $1.2 billion a year just to service the debt required for the acquisition. That's before it covers the cost of actually running the company. And it may just hit the $1.2 billion in revenue, but that's not enough to run the company. That's only enough to service the debt. So I think if you're going to do it, you don't want it to be your only ad platform, because there are some serious questions about the long-term viability. But hey, if you want to run some cheap ads and you don't really mind what you're showing up against, and you don't really mind probably the worst ad targeting of any of the social channels, then Twitter's looking pretty good right now.
Do you know, I just had a quick look to see what the Threads daily active users is looking like. And in April, before a lot of this worse stuff like came down the tracks, they were sitting at 28 million daily active users versus X's 22 million. So they already seem to be like pulling ahead. And whilst I know that Zuckerberg said that advertising is unlikely to come to Threads in the future, I wouldn't be surprised if eventually makes some kind of impression there. It may be only through ownership of like the sponsored tagging of like what people do, maybe not full blown ads, and maybe they use the data to then get you with ads elsewhere, which I would do. I mean, if you can own the conversation but then retarget elsewhere, you would. But yeah, it's certainly looking up all things Zuckerberg if you're over in Meta Towers.
I mean, for Zuck to say that he doesn't think ads are going to come to Threads in the short to medium term makes me think that, like, he's not doing that because he believes that it's the right thing to do, right? That makes me wonder if there's something about the short form post platform that makes it difficult to run ads, because Twitter's ad targeting has always been appalling. And logically, you'd think, well, if people are having conversations about certain topics, you should be able to run ads against those conversations. That seems relatively straightforward to do. And of course, Meta has incredible user data and incredible, data around the websites that people visit and what they talk about and their histories and all sorts of stuff, locations, all of that. So you'd think that Threads would be an amazing monetization opportunity. So it's kind of interesting that he's ruled that out. I can't think that that's because he doesn't want to, because he doesn't like ads. It must be because there's some challenge there.
I wonder if they're for the first time ever putting customer experience at the sort of like the priority. So the complete opposite to Facebook, where user experience means nothing apparently. They imagine you were having a conversation in a bar or in a town square, as everyone likes to call it, and you're having a conversation, and somebody just walks up to you and shouts in your ear, like, there's another bar over here, there's a sandwich, buy these shoes, buy this purple toothpaste or whatever it is, purple shampoo. You'd be really annoyed. Like, you're trying to have a conversation. You've gone there for one particular thing. You'd probably be a bit annoyed if somebody started like blaring at you with some advertising. I wonder if this is literally just, we can own as much of the conversational part of the internet as possible. We can learn from it. It probably feeds into Llama and other things like that. There's a lot of business sense to own that part of the internet, to be the custodian of it, even if you don't necessarily monetize the platform itself. You can get the benefits for the whole of Meta as a bigger company elsewhere. So if I was Zuck, I probably would also make the same play and be really cautious about advertising. Just do the sponsored tagging part of it, or just make it easier for stuff that happens, the brands do organically on Threads, to be easier to kind of transition or use that information through the business platform over on the other, on Facebook and Instagram, stuff like that. If you had the money to own that part of the internet, you would.
I guess they can still also learn about what the users are learning about, what they're watching, what they're listening to, who they're following. And, you might not run the ads in the bar, but if you're listening to everyone's conversations, maybe that influences what you put on the billboard just outside when they head back out onto Instagram or something.
Yeah, perfect analogy. Well, listen, if you listen to this via our audio stream or you're watching it on YouTube and you're thinking, I really don't know what I should do with X, but I also don't know what I should do with my strategy and how to get the best out of SEO and if I should use AI as a part of it, you're still really not sure what to do, head over to exposureninja.com/review and request a free website marketing review. If you're eligible, we'll send you a video outlining how we can help you to hit your revenue goals. And we do particularly well in complex industries. So if you think that we're not for you, ping it on over anyway and we can help you hit those goals. Tim, smashing to have a chat with you, but very much looking forward to having Jess back, and hopefully I'll be here more constant as the weeks go on as well. Otherwise, anything else to say before we say goodbye?
Have a good week, everyone, and be careful out there. It's a wild world.
Take care of yourselves. Chisel. Bye.
See ya.